If you're ready to question everything that you think that you know, in order to discover your true purpose and unleash your full potential, then join us as we dive deep into eye-opening discussions. Hello, this is Dr. Dan Langley, and welcome to Eye-Opening Discussions. It's not just through your physical eyes that we're talking about in this section here, but it's also through your metaphysical eyes or your spiritual eyes to develop this sacred art of self-perception. Now, I had mentioned earlier in the previous episode that Carl Jung had said that if you fail to make the unconscious conscious, then it'll rule your life and you'll call it fate. But knowing yourself has been inscribed at the Temple of Delphi, and even the Greeks studied this. This is an ancient bit of information that I think will be like gold to us as we develop on our own evolutionary journey. The more that we learn about ourselves, the more that we'll learn about our non-selves, which is everyone around us. So if we can learn to see our blind spots, then we will definitely have some breakthroughs. If we can learn to be more loving, kind, and caring for ourselves, then we can be more loving, kind, and caring to other people in our lives. But we got to practice someplace. So whether we practice with our friends and family, or we simply practice with ourselves, then this is a great place to start. And that's what I hope to achieve with this series here. The next topic that we're going to talk about is cataract surgery, kind of near and dear to my heart. I'm very blessed to be an ophthalmic surgeon. I've done over 65,000 cataract surgeries, and it never ceases to amaze me how each cataract that I encounter is completely different from the one before. And I think that says a lot about us as individuals, is that although we have tribes and cliques and families and nations that we all subscribe to, each one of us at our core is a unique individual, a unique fractal of the source, of God, if you say. And so how do we look at that from a standpoint of still being involved in a group collective, but also on an individual basis, because we are unique? And when I do cataract surgery and I see that, first of all, as far as what a cataract is, as far as cataracts are concerned, what a cataract is that most of us were born with a lens on the inside of our eye. And that lens is about the size of an M&M. It's located behind the iris, which is a colored part of the eye. It's multi-layered like an onion. And when we're younger, it's kind of squishy like a gummy bear. It's also nice and crystal clear, usually. However, if we're lucky enough to collect birthdays, then we can collect cloudiness or haziness and or discoloration within the lens implant itself. And so it's almost like a snowflake where each lens is of different size and shape, but also has different layers of distortions within the lens implant or within the lens itself. And so as most cataracts are slowly progressing, then our distortions also can interfere with it within our life, and we may not even know that they're occurring. When we think about cataracts, it is the leading cause of blindness in the world. It's also the leading cause of reversible blindness in the world. So if we can identify what type of distortions we have in our own perception of reality and somehow clean those up in the physical realm, cataract surgery is a fantastic way to give you a new perception on life. And so if I asked the universe for clarity one time, it would simply say, oh, you need to have cataract surgery. And on a physical plane, that's highly successful. It's one of the most rewarding procedures that a person can have done because their cloudiness and their distortions are taken away. Their lives instantaneously improve. They're better drivers. They enjoy the activities that they otherwise were kind of suffering through, and they find much more vibrance in their life. If we were able to identify the distortions that we have in our lives, will we not be able to have a more fulfilling and enjoyable life? I think so. So one of the ways that we can identify the distortions in our life is simply to assess, are we achieving the things that we want to have in life? And if not, then could we choose a different perspective, maybe removing some of the distortions that are simply fabrications or illusions, or even an option that we could choose from. But we don't have to choose from those things. Because we are creators, we can choose any way to see any certain perception. And if our ability to clean up our own personal distortions gives us a much more fulfilling experience, then wouldn't it be worthwhile to identify the distortions that we have in our eyes? And so, although in the physical realm, cataract surgery is a very simple, effective, and safe procedure, I perform anywhere from 40 to 50 twice a week, and it's very successful and have a lot of very happy, healthy patients. But for those of us who have distortions that are beyond just our physical lens, most of us are unaware that some of what we perceive as real is just simply a distortion in our visual system. So whether it's refractive error or cataracts, the truth is not as simple as it sounds. And so to continue along that line is I'm talking about another eye condition that can affect millions of Americans, and that's age-related macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy. Both at their root have to do with malfunctions and dysfunctions of the blood vessels and other limiting membrane structures in the eye that weaken and leak blood and or fluid over time. This causes distortion in the retina, and the retina is simply the organ that perceives light that's focused into our light, and then that sends electrical signals to the brain. And so if there's a distortion in that membrane, or if certain aspects of that tissue are not functioning properly, then we get loss of signal conduction back to the brain. And so macular degeneration and diabetes are usually caused from collecting birthdays, but another aspect of that is that from collecting toxic substances in our life. And so whether it's smoking or other chemical substances that can damage the sensitive retina, whether it's excessive sugar, that in most situations, sugar would not necessarily be bad, but in excessive amounts can cause damage to the blood vessels, which will cause leakage and of both fluid and proteins in the retina. And so if we can identify aspects of our nutrition which seem to be toxic for us, then we could conceivably have a healthy retina and thus have clear perception of our reality. What if it was just simply due to a lack of proper building blocks in our diet, such as lutein, zeaxanthin, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids? If our diet is somehow deficient in any of these nutrients, then it can affect the way that our retina is able to repair itself just from oxidative stress that we may encounter on a daily basis. And so even sunlight has been proposed to be a carcinogen in excess to the retina. I like the sun, so get as much sun as you can. And so if we can consider these things as creating a toxic environment, either due to long-standing exposure to these toxic products or having an inadequate abundance of the proper building blocks, then it would be nice, or it would be helpful if we could identify what these toxic environments could be. And in doing so, we could decrease the risk of developing macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy. But in addition to that, if we take assessment of our life outside our physical body, maybe even thinking about metaphysical or spiritual, what type of perspectives do we have that are healthy and are contributing to a clear view of the world? What type of perspectives do we maintain that are maybe toxic to our healthy perception of the world? And so some of those unhealthy or toxic perceptions could be like cognitive distortion, such as an all or nothing thinking, that simply because one thing isn't perfect, that the rest is a failure. Or maybe even emotional reasoning, that if I'm feeling bad right now, then the whole situation has to be bad. And some other toxic perspectives are such as that we can have just within relationships with other people, such as jealousy or controlling. And our desire to control another person's decisions, thoughts, or emotions can be a very unhealthy or toxic perspective that we have either been taught as we were growing up or that is encouraged in society. And we have to simply ask ourselves, is jealousy and or controlling behavior, is that really going to benefit my long-term happiness? And if it's not, to simply exclude those toxic perspectives or to refine those toxic perspectives. What about just self-defeating beliefs, such as I'm not good enough, or even the fear of vulnerability? If we are unwilling or unable to share our thoughts and feelings with those closest to us, what type of relationship could we really build except a superficial one, or maybe even a toxic relationship? So identifying the way that we are exposed to toxic elements in our environment can decrease our risk for developing macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy. And as well as reviewing our toxic belief system or perspectives that we may have, that as children, we didn't quite know what we were receiving. And now as adults, we can be discerning and simply say, I want to choose a different type of perspective. I want to choose one that supports the future that I want to build. I want to have happiness and harmony and growth and evolution. And so in order to achieve that effect, I need to choose the cause that will give us that effect. And that would be healthy thinking and healthy relationships with other people. So hopefully this has been helpful. I like to discuss the similarities and parallels between physical ophthalmology and the way that we perceive light on a physical plane, but also on a metaphysical and spiritual plane as well. So hopefully this has provided some illumination into some of the blind spots that we have either consciously promoted in our life or unconsciously are unaware of. And hopefully we can come to some breakthroughs to have the type of life that we're looking for. So thank you again for joining us.